Lieutenant Cotton panted as he crawled prone across the mud-covered ground at Fort Benning. The large installation had been on high alert since the start of the alien invasion, just like every other base around the world. The invasion had seemed to come to an unknown halt after several countries had managed to push off invasion forces from major cities. The media reported most that the aliens had been defeated, but that was only because the world governments had collectively worked together to hide the truth that the aliens continued to send ships to Earth. They did this to stop the mass panic and rioting that would occur around the world, which would just make them an easier target to the aliens. Cotton quickly rose from the muddy ground and was almost knocked over by an explosion a few feet from him that kicked up dirt and mud. In his arms he held XCOM's new standard soldier rifle, the XM9, a completed and upgraded version of the XM8 prototype assault rifle that the US Army had never gotten into mass production. He switched into the free-round burst mode of fire as small figures of sectoids popped up, and Cotton dispatched them without hesitation as he looked through the electronic sight of his rifle and did what he was trained to do. The aliens falling like cards. Cotton had finished taking out the sectoids and rushed as fast as he could to a flare, and upon reaching it, he shouted, "Time!" as he completed the training course. Applause was heard by Cotton as floodlights activated to reveal several instructors in grey camouflage fatigue who walked over to Cotton and soon congratulated him. "One of the top 10 in all of North America. XCOM team. Impressive, Captain. Now, go to the meeting hall and await further orders." Cotton saluted and returned to the armory table to set his rifle and armor down for the next person in training to use as he made his trip to the meeting hall. While walking to the meeting hall, Cotton couldn't help but smile at the influx of new recruits. The number of people wanting to enlist in the service after the alien incursion had almost tripled, and people all over the world were all trying to do their part. This much patriotism hasn't been seen since the Second World War. Cotton arrived at the meeting hall and out of his pockets pulled out a small patch that showed the Earth with a blue X on it, and in the Latin words, Vigilo Confide. It was the XCOM patch, and since this was an XCOM meeting, Cotton was allowed to wear it on his arm, but nowhere else, as officially they didn't exist. Only the leaders of the 16 founding council nations and a few necessary civilians or other staff were allowed to know anything about their existence, lest they jeopardize security by letting it slip out to the aliens. A united human force was stepping up to oppose them. It was as they said, loose lips sink ship. As Cotton sat down in a chair next to the other squad and platoon leaders, he noticed there was a man from the Mexican Special Forces and a woman from the Canadian Special Forces. Before he could ponder on it any further, the same man who had walked over him when his APC pulled up back in San Francisco had just stepped up onto a podium in front of the gathered group. Everyone quickly stood at attention before the superior officer. "Everyone at ease. We have a lot to talk about and not a lot of time to do it. First of all, I am General Martin Lewis Franklin, and as of yesterday, I am officially the acting officer in charge of the North American branch of XCOM." The room remained quiet as General Franklin activated a projector and soon began explaining what information they had on the aliens while pointing it out on diagrams and photos taken from combat zones or dissection tables. Franklin began explaining how the aliens used some sort of crystals that did not exist on the periodic table of elements to power their weapons and ships, and that after several dissections and tests, it had been determined that the Greys, now dubbed the sectoids, had once been aquatic, and that they had evidence of possible psychic abilities among the aliens. On top of the sectoids, Franklin brought up that they had managed to capture 3 live aliens. However, not much information could be gathered since there was no way to understand them. But that dilemma was being handled by some of the world's best language professors and a new universal translator that was being programmed by multiple supercomputers. The next topic Franklin went over was of standard XCOM operating procedures. Every XCOM operative will obey the laws of whatever country they were in. If a foreigner was operating in another country, he was under the command of a local officer. All XCOM facilities were to not share information with each other unless important. Otherwise, everything was on a need-to-know basis to lower the risk of vital information being leaked out to the aliens in the event a base was captured or infiltrated. This continued on for almost an hour before some personnel then began handing out files with deployment orders for everyone there. Cotton checked his orders and saw he would be acting captain of the combat team at a base titled the Crow's Nest, operating near Area 51 with a new team. His base would officially be handling oddities, things that other XCOM bases didn't have time to handle or that needed to be kept contained, as well as regular combat ops and the security of Area 51 due to its obvious strategic value. The European branch of XCOM was currently attempting to discover the secrets of the mysterious crystal-like structures that seemed to power the alien ships and weapons. The scientists at the particle collider were currently working to discover the elemental composition of the alien crystal by running it through a small series of tests to determine atomic values and other such data. This better yield results, Doctor. The gruff tone of General Franz Heinrich Schmidt, acting leader of the European XCOM branch, said to the chief scientist at the facility. This is a big risk we are taking doing these experiments in a civilian facility, though in truth the general had no say in the matter since it would take almost another month for the proper facilities to be finished at his own primary base, and they were short on time. The Japanese had already made some headway in researching the alien alloys, and the Australians were working on a way to capture some of them live. The Americans were also in the process of building a new fighter plane to go toe-to-toe with the alien ships. Everyone seemed to be working on a way to beat the aliens, and Schmidt didn't want Europe to be left out of the fun. Sir, with all due respect, the lead scientist said, while running calculations on a calculator before pushing buttons on the collider control panel. It's not as if I can wave a magic wand and get results. This takes time, and we may not even have results from this. Smith grunted and turned when someone whispered, "Oh, you'll get your results, don't worry." He then turned back to continue to speak to the head scientist as the test began, and they began bombarding the crystal shard with highly sped up and energized electrons. The readings it gave were like almost nothing the scientists had ever seen before. The closest thing they could compare it to would be uranium. Soon, the crystals began glowing brightly and producing an immense amount of heat, and warnings were appearing on every screen. "Shut it down!" shouted Smith to the scientist. "I'm trying, but it's not responding. None of the failsafes are working." Smith then ordered everyone out and had to carry out a shivering scientist in the fetal position who kept screaming about how they were all going to die. Just as the final soldier and civilians made it out of the facility, there was a bright flash and a fire around the entire trail of the collider as Discord began chuckling and whispered to himself, "See? You got results." The great and powerful Trixie sat on her carriage as a blonde, cross-eyed Pegasus pony pulled up the path to Canterlot while she dangled a muffin on a string at the end of her face, just close enough to keep the male mare chasing the muffin. Trixie could not explain what had drawn her to Canterlot, since many of the foolish ponies there believed her to be some kind of fraud, a lie, of course, because her magic was real. Well, real enough. And no matter what, Trixie was sure that this would be quite an adventure. She could surely use it and hopefully a payday, because ever since that purple book mare back in Ponyville revealed her difficulty with magic, Trixie had found it far harder to make bits to provide for herself and her show, which is why she resorted to using a muffin to get to Canterlot quickly and cheaply. Come on now, don't you want the muffin, Ditzy? Get the muffin. Yes, the great and powerful muffin, Trixie said, taunting Derpy Hooves to fly faster after the muffin in front of her. Derpy meanwhile was having a fun time chasing the muffin and wondered why the unicorn dressed like a wizard kept talking about how great she was when Derpy obviously wasn't listening. But she liked to be nice, so Derpy just focused on the muffin and was glad she would let Dinky go on a field trip with the doctor to another planet. Not to think that Derpy was a bad or neglectful mother. On the contrary, Derpy demanded to be chaperone for her daughter every time her class went on a field trip. But she loved and trusted the doctor enough to know that he would keep her safe and sound, especially since he said he was taking her to a planet of the greatest bouncing castles in the whole universe. But as she pulled the carriage, for a split second, one of Derpy's tilted eyes caught a glimpse of a figure in the clouds. But when she turned to look, she saw nothing, and Trixie coaxed her to chase after the muffin again. Private Sneaky Breeze of the Pegasus Corps stealth flyers flew from cloud to cloud above the suspicious carriage without so much as a whisper. The stealth flyers had been a new idea created by Princess Luna to act as spies only without actually infiltrating enemy ranks. More accurately, a stealth flyer Pegasus was a living spy balloon, but they had other uses besides counting enemy supply lines and numbers. They worked well as security, which is what Sneaky Breeze was up to. The pure white dyed fur of the Royal Canterlot Guard allowed Breeze to easily hide on or among the clouds, especially as his armor was the color of steel and not gold like regular guards. Breeze slowly trailed behind the carriage as he watched it to make sure there was no chance of it being changelings or diamond dogs trying to sneak into the castle. Come on, I'm not an idiot. You must be up to something, Breeze whispered to himself as he flew over a traveling cloud and used it to travel unseen directly above the carriage and tried to figure out what the strange unicorn was up to. He had been ordered to tail the carriage since no magicians had been scheduled to come into Canterlot recently, and a unicorn using a muffin to make a Pegasus pull a carriage when there were perfectly good earth ponies to do it screamed of wrongdoing. And all guard ponies hated criminal scums who tried to break the law in their town. Trixie soon pulled up into Canterlot proper and began traveling towards the castle. Feeling uneasy, Sneaky Breeze pulled out a yellow flag from underneath his helmet and began to wave it in a well-practiced pattern to signal the squad of unicorn watchers with telescopes inside the castle towers to send a message to the gate guard to not allow entry to his target. Sneaky Breeze slipped the flag back into its helmet and stretched his wings before flying to the castle's front gates and joining up with the guards there. They were joined by a muscular dark grey colored earth pony, his mentor, Sergeant Rockfist. The pony was a veteran of several raids into illegal diamond dog slavery rings and former basic training officer. Rockfish still bore many scars from his battles, one being a large set of claw marks over his left cutie mark, which consisted of a hoof holding a rock. Sneaky Breeze was a gust of wind, nothing sneakier than the air itself. As Trixie pulled up, she cleared her throat and declared out loud, "Clear the way, knaves, for the great and powerful Trixie! I have come to entertain the masses and bring life to the poor boring lives of the rich and successful." The sergeant spoke first in a loud voice that could only come from years of breaking pony spirits and remaking them into fine-tuned tools for combat. "Ma'am, I'm afraid you need to leave and come back with an invitation." This astounded Trixie to the point. She hopped off her carriage of tricks and got right in the sergeant's face. "You dare deny the great and The sergeant suddenly shouted over her in a voice that made all other guards except for Reese move away. "You spoiled rat! I don't care how much you whine, both. My word is law, and I say you ain't getting in." Trixie, not one to be defeated easily, got in Rockfist's face, and a shouting match soon began as Derpy walked over to chew her muffin and wondered why they were fighting. After several minutes of arguing, Sneaky Breeze soon butted his head into the argument to separate the two, but did so just as Trixie was coming in to go bursting into a rant. The two ended up smashing their heads together, causing Breeze to be disoriented while Trixie had a bump on her head next to her horn. "Oh dear sweet Celestia, ma'am, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to." Before he could finish, Sneaky was pounced on by an enraged Trixie, who began punching his face with her hooves savagely, leaving nasty welts and bruises, causing him to remember why he chose to be a stealth flyer rather than a fighter. "You dare hit me?" she shouted, while the other guards simply jumped into the fray to save their fallen brothers as a brawl soon broke out, with all the fighters accidentally pulling Trixie into the brawl and rolling all the way back to Trixie's carriage of magic potions and knickknacks, knocking it over. Discord watched with joy at how he barely had to do anything to cause all of this, and used his powers to open all of Trixie's potion stock, which rained down upon the dirt ground on Trixie, Rockfist, Derpy, and Sneaky Breeze. At that moment, a unicorn guard attempted to capture Trixie in a magic bubble, where Trixie used her magic to stop it. And Discord used his magic to mix their energies and the potions on the ground to create a portal. A large swirling black vortex soon opened up and sucked Trixie and Derpy in together at once. The guards soon scattered for safety, save for Rockfist, who was digging his hooves into the ground as he tried to hold on to Breeze with his upper hooves, who was flapping his wings as hard as he could, as half of his body was already inside the vortex. "Sarge, please, I don't want to die!" He yelled with tears in his eyes as the sergeant began pulling him out of the vortex, slowly but surely. "Hold on, boy. I promised your mom and pop I'd take care of ye, and I don't break my promises." But Breeze slipped from his grasp and fell into the dark vortex, shouting at the top of his lungs for his favorite sergeant. Rockfist adjusted his helmet and frowned before jumping in head first after his best friend's son. "I'm coming for you, boy." As soon as the 4 selected ponies were in the portal, it closed, leaving all who had seen the event confused out of their minds, and 2 very angry monarchs to wonder what caused it all, and one happy Draconicus wishing he had a YouTube to post a clip on. Meanwhile, the 4 ponies shouted and felt themselves spun and thrown around wildly as they shifted from one universe to another. Finally, they ended up tossed out somewhere outside of Washington, D.C., on the roof of an office building, which was currently under attack. But the disoriented ponies were so out of it they didn't notice as several armored figures soon began to rush up to the roof to get a better vantage point on their enemies, and found 4 cartoonish Technicolor ponies lying in a pile.